It is an honor to be here. It is my first trip to Nebraska. The drive over yesterday, though the weather was a little bit rough, the serenity of the rolling countryside, the agricultural activity, it is a joy to see. I want to share with you today some of the efforts that we've done in our work and highlighting specifically some work we recently completed for the state of Alabama. And I will probably run some things by you that you will sit there and think that'll never work in Nebraska. Please remember that 20 years ago we didn't think we'd have disc screens, optical sorting, food grade plastics, that are a lot of things are possible, but we have to aim high, and it is a competitive world. We've got to work towards those high goals or we will be left behind. I'd like to the best thing I can do to show who SERDC is, as they say in journalism, look at where the money comes from. These are our sponsors. SERDC has about 100 members, many state governments, a few local governments, and some smaller businesses, but these are the large sponsors that put in the bulk of our budget, and then from that drives much of our agenda. Our mission, Carrie read our mission to unite government and industry and spoke that our effort is around the economic impact of recycling. We do believe, and this is a quote I've borrowed from a professor in the economics department at the College of Charleston, who we've had in engaged to do some specific work with us. But we do understand there's an environmental impact of recycling. We're just going to assume you know that. We're going to assume that our elected decision makers know that. We're going to assume that our households know that. But what we are really out to demonstrate and then promulgate is that there is a very large economic impact that's happening here that has developed. We, as recycling program started in the early 90s, and there's a few of you that were with us as we were sorting bins at the curb and other things that we did to get this started. The municipalities all jumped and built a lot of recycling programs in the early days, and the supply side built up, and there was many times bottlenecks in the chain in places there was no place for the material to go. Industry has responded over the last 2 decades, and there is a lot of demand for material. Now, we are hearing a lot of issues today about, specifically as we look at pricing, and we need to understand that our market prices are much more complex than what we may deal with day to day. But first and foremost, our material prices will follow the price of energy. When we substitute any recycled product in place of virgin in manufacturing, the manufacturer is going to save energy. The manufacturer saves energy, he saves money, he's more competitive in the global market, and therefore they are looking to incorporate recycled content where they can. Imagine the 8th grader making a spitball. Well, let me back up. We all know that the aluminum is the big energy saver. If we recycle aluminum, it's 95% less than the energy it takes to make aluminum from raw bauxite. We obviously see a parallel between plastic production and oil prices. But think in paper, a large part of our material stream still in fiber. If we have the 8th grader that's making a spitball in class, it's a lot easier to make that out of a piece of notebook paper than it is if he's picking up toothpicks. He's going to chew for a long time on those toothpicks before that spitball is complete. I see somebody say, I'm Southern, we have Southern analogies. I actually will credit this analogy to the evil empire in Durham. It was at the Duke Environmental School. They came up with this and promulgated it. And we do know, as you said in my bio, that is not the right place to borrow anything. But our paper mills operate just the same way as that 8th grader. They're taking wood fiber and pulping that to where it will then go through the screens and hit the drums and make our paper products. And when the recycled content hits that, it's a huge amount of energy saving. So then we start looking at our energy prices, and this graph tracks energy and our average weighted value of the material that's going into our material recovery facilities for the last 10 years. And you can see where we had our spike in 2008 when gas was hitting $4 a gallon. And then we immediately, that was in the summer, right before the Olympics. And that by Thanksgiving, we're buying gas again for about $1.50. And you know, our commodities followed that same curve. If you, and you probably can't see it from there, but if you look very closely or look at the data behind this, you'll really see that our prices are about a quarter, about 90 days behind whatever energy's doing. So what energy does today, you can expect to see that about 90 days from now in your aggregate mix of materials. It is optimistic that we've seen a little bit of an upturn of late. What we are seeing that's different now than in 1995, back at that point in time, there were stories in the New York Times running about the failure of recycling to find markets. There were warehouses in New Jersey stacked floor to ceiling with baled material that had no place to go. Prices are down now. They're below that average line that we've had over the last 10 or 12 years. But the material's still going. The demand still exists for this material. It's just not bringing quite the same revenue, but it's still going through the system. SERDC completed a project in 2010 where it was EPA supported to identify the manufacturers in our 11-state region that are consuming the material coming out of our recycling programs. The Southeast is very friendly to manufacturing. We've got low disposal rates. We've got low utility rates. We're all right-to-work states. Industry likes the Southeast, and in 2010, we identified 206 facilities employing 48,500 people in manufacturing jobs. These manufacturing jobs, this is the holy grail for economic development. This isn't more hospitality industry. This isn't other service. Those jobs all have value. Those people in those jobs have merit and worth. But these are the jobs that our economic development commissions are seeking to bring. And this, while all of that work's going on, recycling is quietly there creating more jobs. Indeed, we are updating this report. We finished our data search on that in the last few weeks. At our summit next month, we're going to roll out the results and have a new fresh map that will have even more of these dots on it. But more importantly, we're going to add another 30,000 manufacturing jobs to our database in our region that are dependent on this material. And I will go so far and to tell you, well, nobody's inventoried it here in Nebraska. I think it would be a good exercise. You may or may not see similar results, and you may not see enough here immediately within the state to buy all the material coming from your programs, but I will assure you that there is a demand for the material coming from your programs, and for if you've got trailer load quantities of clean material, and we do have to start thinking trailer load quantities. This is manufacturing, not a smaller operation, but if you trailer load quantities, there's buyers in the Southeast that'll pay the freight from Nebraska to get that material there. With the possible glass doesn't move as far as others, but I know of fiber and plastics vendors that will be very happy to have your material and will be glad to put you in touch with them. Looking briefly just at some of the states that we have, and we've looked at Tennessee, just in paper and metals, there's 23 manufacturing facilities employing nearly 20,000 people. This is huge, the amount of impact that this is having in our region. Similarly, our work in Alabama, this using the professor of economics at the College of Charleston, we surveyed Alabama businesses to determine their payroll, their number of jobs, and then Professor Hefner takes that data and looks not only at the direct jobs that we inventoried on our other report, but he then looks at the indirect jobs, those companies that are supplying the recycling industry with equipment and other supplies, and then further to look at the induced jobs, the payrolls that are given to the direct jobs and the indirect jobs. Those are spent then within their state and turning over. I mean, this is when we all go out to eat or we go to the movies. These are recycling dollars that are turning over in the economy, and by his work, he's estimating that that's responsible for 84,000 jobs in Alabama. That's huge in a southern state like Alabama. But I looked at your report that was done here recently. But, you know, it is a start to start accounting this, and I encourage you to keep that because you need that data, because these numbers may not be quite as big as what I flashed for the whole region, but these are for the 2,300 people here in Nebraska. These jobs matter, and for their families and for your communities. So recycling is having an impact here. I want to look at what recycling is as our material moves from each person that handles this. I mean, when our resident sets the recycling out or drops it off at the curb, the municipality or the contractor then on the collection side has that, and it moves from there to a material recovery facility where we're separating it out, and on from there to sometimes an intermediate processor, and ultimately to a manufacturer who's going to create some type of consumer good that indeed then is going to go back through our retail system back to where it started. Every one of these transactions is a financial transaction. There's a lot of money moving around this. We do have in these low prices the municipality or the county government that's sitting there running the front end collection, and they've got the material when it's all mixed up. They've got it at its lowest value, because once we separate it, it's worth more. Once we process it, it's worth more yet. In manufacturing, it's worth more again. But it's at its lowest value at collection. And also at collection for many of our materials, this is where the highest cost of operation. It takes a lot of money to run trucks door to door. So how do we crack that, and how do we make this go around? Because it is those other thousands of jobs around that value chain that need that to happen. So the challenge for our industry right now is to solve this problem where these contracts between the MRFs and the municipalities are being negotiated, and our elected officials are saying this is supposed to pay for itself. Well, right now it's not. But it needs to continue because a lot of our economy is dependent upon it, and the cost to maintain it is going to be very small against the greater picture. Unfortunately, that greater picture is not what is discussion frequently during budget times when we're looking and during budget renegotiation. And we've got to look at that specifically because not only do we need it for the economic value, but our citizens want to recycle. Your own survey conducted recently put it that I think it was 80-some-odd% of the citizens of Nebraska want to participate in recycling. That is typical anywhere I go. People want to recycle. Now, it's got to be easy, and they want it to be cheap. Well, you know, I like everything that way too. But it is the challenge to us to figure out how we get there. The study largely was done by the Carton Council, an organization seeking to get more cartons into recycle bins. So how do we solve that? I mean, we've got to, in order to be effective and deal with this, we're going to have a new outlook on how we're paying for recycling, but along the way we've got to be efficient. We cannot do things the way we've always done them at times, particularly in the early days when we stood on the side of the street loading material by material and putting this bottle here and that can there and the newspaper over there. I mean, it was costing us $300 a ton to do curb sorts. That's not going to work. That's why we went to single stream collection, because it's more efficient. And we've got to look for these efficiencies in our routes, and we've got to remember that our costs go down as our participation rate goes up. So we need to look at ways to have high participation and to handle material as inexpensively. We also need to keep an eye on contamination as we go along the way, because contamination drags down the value around the chain wherever it is. One of the best tools that we have seen to reduce cost has been the move to carts rather than bin collection for curbside. Roll carts offer lots of advantages. Homeowners by and large really love them. You do have to be careful in your retirement communities because they may think it's way too big and they don't want to wrestle it, and it's a valid point. But by and large, when we go to 95-gallon carts or possibly 65-gallon, one thing you can do with 95-gallon carts is you can start collecting recycling every other week instead of every week. Collection costs immediately go in half. Almost every city that we've seen that has gone from bins to carts, we're seeing a dramatic, immediate increase in the amount of material captured. Typically in the neighborhood of 25 to 40% more material coming because it's easier for the homeowner. They're not keeping the bin in their kitchen, the cart's outside or in the garage, it's not in the way, and it's single stream, so we can just throw it all in. It gets a lot easier to manage that way. And it can be outside and it can rain all at once because it's got that lid on it. And when we put it out on the curb, everybody's going to be happy because if it's windy, and the wind does blow here, it's not going to pick anything up and blow the paper and litter down the street. Our streets are better, our citizens are happier, they like our program better. These are the things we need to go along with our other participation tools. Not only curbside, but I would encourage you to look very hard at single stream for your drop-off centers. A lot of Nebraska is rural and it's not ever going to have curbside collection of waste or recycling. We want to get our recycling system operating parallel to our waste collection, but I would say there's a lot of cost advantages to going to single stream drop-off. We talked at length about that in the workshop this morning, and those slides will be available to carry for you to do as you wish. But it is, not only is it a lot less expensive, it's a lot easier for the homeowner because now your rural residents can take advantage of the convenience of single stream that the municipality resident experiences. They don't have to spend the afternoon at the convenience center, the 10, 15 minutes sorting out their materials. They just drop it and go. Particularly this time of year when there's a lot of yellow jackets floating around there, it gets a lot nicer to leave faster. But then your costs also go down the faster you're moving your people through it. But then as we gather all this single stream material from these carts and from our convenience centers, it's got to go somewhere. In this work that we finished for Alabama, we looked, Alabama's grant program has been funding lots of small county separations. There's several using prisoners from their local jail to do hand sorts on conveyor belts. There's some a little more automated than that, but they've invested in many corners of the state with these small county MRFs, and SERDC is giving a very strong recommendation to Alabama, as we would to Nebraska, to move away from that structure. And having local government in the MRF operation is probably not the best role. If a local government operator needs a new piece of equipment today at the MRF, they're going to have to wait until the budget is put together in February and it's going to be approved before July 1, and then the funds will probably be released when the tax bills go out in August, and maybe about this time next year they'll see that fork truck. If Waste Connections, Waste Management, Recommunity, Sunoco, Pratt, any of these other privates, if they need a new fork truck, they'll cut the purchase order this afternoon and it'll probably get delivered Monday. They're much more responsive, they're much more flexible, they're much going to be more adept at dealing with the changing waste stream that we got. We don't have near as much paper in our waste stream. Many of our MRFs that are 10 years old were designed for 65 to 70% paper, and they're not seeing that. They're seeing 40% paper in an awful lot of containers, and they're having to retool those. To go back when you've built a MRF and go back in 5 to 10 years and tell the county you've got to invest equipment because it's not managing the material right, you know, that's not a position your solid waste director wants to be in. They're going to say we've already funded it. That's why the private sector is much more efficient or much more agile and can respond to these issues. And the private sector can negotiate it through these pricing cycles we have with the end users much better than local governments will ever be able to. We urge you strongly to get on the same page for the materials that you're collecting. In my hometown, I'm told not to recycle cartons. In the county surrounding that town, they're told that they do recycle cartons. It's all going to the same MRF. This makes no sense. Then we have people, well, what do I do with this? Well, my neighbor does this with it. And you say yes and you say no. Well, before long, we've got confused participants. Our confused recyclers will become disenfranchised with us. And when they're disenfranchised, our participation will fall off. We've got to get on the same page and communicate some straightforward messages for what we do, and we've got to come together to work that. I want to encourage you to have a statewide message for recycling. I encourage this morning strongly for DEQ to get involved and put some leadership out to develop the recycling message for Nebraska. What is it? What is the iconic thing that can be anywhere that people will recognize? That means Nebraska recycles. What is the logo? What's the catchword? And I don't have that for you, but you need to come up with that, something that will have ownership around the community, around the state, and people will know that is recycled, so that it becomes, this is what we do with our recyclables. But get that message there, and I do believe DEQ, Wastecap, the Nebraska State Recycling Association, I'm slow, but I get there. Can come together and deliver this. We're seeing that in several of our other states, but we need to take this forward. And then there's a wealth of other tools to help you. The recycle guys that some of you may have seen, cartoon characters, that came out of DEQ's counterpart in South Carolina, DHEC. You've got a lot of material with the Recycling Partnership on their website. Tremendous outreach material sources there. I don't have much time. I wanted to speak briefly to glass. That we're seeing a lot of evolution or change in the way glass is collected and managed by many different communities across the state. Largely, when glass is in the single stream mix, it's dragging that value down. It's worth less than what it costs to process it. And that's a problem. Yet our citizens still want to recycle glass, so where's our compromise? And we're seeing lots of cities work one way to another, some dropping it out of single stream collection, some diverting it to solely drop off, others just refusing to drop it altogether. And I've used this slide in other places that I understand Omaha is getting out of the glass recycling business. You are not alone. We're seeing this all across the region and indeed across the country. There's a lot of work going into this. The Glass Packaging Institute is sponsoring the Glass Recycling Coalition, just so we can have some more acronyms out there, I think. But it is an effort of the end users coming together, and many of the bottle manufacturers are at the table trying to solve this problem of how we can make this work better. There's an absence at the table right now of Anheuser-Busch and Miller Coors, and New Belgium, Sierra Nevada, a lot of these other smaller breweries are very sustainably oriented. Heineken and some of the foreign-owned companies have got their sustainability goals. They're putting a lot of pressure to get more recycled content and are willing to spend money to do it. But right now, those two big boys aren't at the table, and we're not going to solve that problem until they take some ownership of that. So consider that the next time you have to quick shop. I want to briefly, as I'm running out of time, but there was mention to your 17% of what's to landfill in Nebraska is food waste. This has become a tremendous issue facing our country. When I started in this business, over half of the waste stream was paper. Plastic was about 2%, food was about 3%. But we've seen so much change. We don't use as much paper and certainly don't throw away as much anymore. But we don't have the infrastructure out there for food management. With your award today, there are some gains coming, but we don't have anything universal out there. But we do have an opportunity to look at the mistakes that we made in our growth in recycling over the last 25 years and go, how can we build the infrastructure for organics management and skip forward and miss some of those? So we've got a tremendous opportunity in front of us. And remember, in the food recovery hierarchy, not only do we want to compost, use vermiculture to make a soil amendment, but anytime we can reuse that food or get it to hungry people, that is important. In spite of over half the food that's created in this country is going to waste, either on the production side or post-consumer side, and yet we still have 50 million people amongst us that are food insecure. That's not right, and we need to fix it. And that, for me, goes beyond anything we do for the environment, anything we do for the economy. We need to feed our brothers and sisters, and it's got to happen. But to stop preaching and get more back on topic, maybe, items that we strongly urge you to work towards is universal access. Let's look 10 years down the road and see a recycling bin next to every trash receptacle, everywhere. It's standard. It is the only way we see it anymore. We don't imagine it different. And that we have educated people along the way. They know what goes in there and what doesn't, because we've created that common suite and have put it there so they understand. Let's look at some disposal bans, both on the local and state level. There are some things that should not be in landfills. Aluminum cans do not belong in the trash can. It should be that simple. I know it's not. We talked at length about unit pricing or pay-as-you-throw this morning. You have one stellar example of pay-as-you-throw in the state. You need to look at that success and promulgate that. And I would, as I've learned about your collection infrastructure in the private sector, I would strongly urge you to work forward, and it will be an uphill battle, to look at some hauler licensing requirements to pick up and handle solid waste, and some strong enforced requirements around that for service provision. And hopefully someday you maybe even look at franchise districts, because you would lower cost, improve safety, and get your material collected. With that, I'll give you my blatant plug to join us in Atlanta next month. We'd love to see you there, and I thank you very much.